This presentation is about plagiarism and how to avoid it. An overview of what to expect from this presentation includes going over what plagiarism is, why plagiarism occurs, and even how to avoid plagiarizing. So what is plagiarism? Well, the next few slides are going to give you some different definitions about plagiarism. According to plagiarism.org, many people think of plagiarism as copying another's work or borrowing someone else's original ideas. But terms like copying and borrowing can disguise the seriousness of the offense. Merriam-Webster's online dictionary defines plagiarism to mean, first, to steal and pass off the ideas or words of another as one's own, or to use another's production without crediting the source. It also defines plagiarism as committing literary theft, and finally, to present as new and original idea or product derived from an already existing source. But here's a more severe definition of plagiarism. In other words, plagiarism is an act of fraud. It involves both stealing someone else's work and lying about it afterwards. This also comes from plagiarism.org. So if a student or anybody really chooses to plagiarize, they're more or less stealing and lying. So there's definitely some unethical practices involved when plagiarism occurs. And so this is why we need to talk about the severity of plagiarism and really understand what it is so we can avoid doing it in our own work. So plagiarism is broken down into two categories. There's that deliberate plagiarism, which is rewriting from books and articles, copying and pasting from web pages and online sources to create a patchwork of writing, or even buying, downloading, or borrowing a paper, even getting your friend to do it. All of that is plagiarism that's considered deliberate. In other words, a student who chooses to do the deliberate plagiarism knows they're plagiarizing, knows they're doing the wrong thing, and chooses to do it anyway. But also, and here's the scary part, there's accidental plagiarism, where the student didn't realize they were plagiarizing. And this occurs if the student doesn't know when and how to cite, when a student doesn't know how to paraphrase or summarize a source properly, when a student doesn't know what common knowledge is, and also recycling an old paper. In other words, the student plagiarizes himself. So from class to class, we expect all work to be your original work, of course. But self-plagiarism is when you take a paper you wrote for another class and submit it to a different class to be graded without changing any of it. That's also considered plagiarism because you didn't write that paper for that class in particular. You actually wrote it for a previous class. Examples of plagiarism include turning in someone's work as your own, copying words or ideas of someone else without giving credit to that person, failing to put a quotation in quotation marks, giving incorrect information about the source of a quotation, and changing the words but copying the sentence structure of a source without giving credit. Finally, another example is copying so many words or ideas from a source that it makes up the majority of your work, whether you give credit or not. So remember, when writing, your words and ideas, the paper needs to be mostly full of your words and ideas, not the words and ideas of somebody else. So why does it happen? If it's such an ethical violation, why would students do it? Why would anybody risk plagiarizing? Well, probably the most common reason it happens is because of lack of knowledge or basic skills. Students are unaware of procedures for citation and paraphrasing, so they mess up a little bit. Sometimes it's just authorial identity insecurities. In other words, a student is insecure about sounding unimpressive, so they rely on the words of others in the hopes they don't get caught. I would say to that, just stick to the words you know, and it'll come out how you meant it to come out. Cultural differences might be another issue. an education researcher named Mr. Martin found that individualist-oriented students were more likely to plagiarize. In other words, Western culture, which is what we are, is more individualist. So we pride ourselves in doing the work ourselves, not going out and working with others and not asking those questions. So because we're more inclined to do things individually, a lot of times we find ourselves afraid to ask or afraid to admit when we don't understand something. So we just kind of turn to our own devices, which might be the unethical plagiarism, and hope we don't get caught. Cognitive issues are another reason students might plagiarize. In other words, students do not perceive what they are doing as unethical or severe. So this concludes our PowerPoint presentation. Information from this presentation came from Drs. Asman and Fox, both from University of Hawaii and Maui. Y'all take care.